Hi, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Bryndís, and today we're talking about the books I read in August. As you can see from the title, I read a very difficult book this month, or this last month, and we're going to talk about it because it was not War and Peace, although I did read War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy in August, and I'm like so proud of myself. But okay, so we're going to talk about the 3 books I read in August. Yes, I read 3 books. I don't even know when I read so little in a month. I kind of knew that going into the month. It was a month of a lot of socialization. So I was spending a lot of time with family. Of course, the Olympics were there in the first couple of weeks. So all my waking hours were basically spent watching those or those events. And then, I got back to work, having to work very long hours for a couple of weeks there to kind of finish all the preparation for the fall semester. So it was definitely not a very reading-friendly month. It was a fantastic month. I had a lovely time doing everything I was doing, but for reading, it was definitely not the best month I've had. Although I think that I have read a couple of the best books I've ever read in my entire life. So in that, it was definitely quality over quantity, for sure. But, okay, so I think I'm just gonna go with them. I'm gonna start with the Agatha Christie book I read, because of course I read an Agatha Christie book. Then we're gonna talk about War and Peace, and then the book that basically destroyed me. So this is the first book that I read. It's actually called Three-Act Tragedy, and Murder in 3 Acts in the American title. 3-Act Tragedy, and I listened to it as an audiobook, narrated by Hugh Fraser, obviously, because that's just how I roll with the Poirot books by Agatha Christie. So this was quite interesting. This definitely not one of my favorite, but having said that, I gave it 3 stars. I still did enjoy it, and I'm definitely going to probably reread it at some point. So I'm thinking maybe I should actually give it 4 stars. But yeah, so maybe I will actually give it 4 stars, because thinking about it and talking about it, I really did enjoy this book. So it is about Sir Charles Cartwright, who is a renowned actor. He holds this kind of a soiree, or like a dinner party type of a thing, and a man dies. He thinks it's poison, or people seem to think it's poison, but there was no evidence of that. So, but then Sir Cartwright holds another party, and another person dies. And then Poirot gets suspicious. Poirot isn't really, like in the first third of the book or so, he really isn't in this book very much. Or even more than that. I mean, he comes a little bit, but then he leaves. So it's more following 3 people who are like amateur sleuths. It's Cartwright, and then there is this lady, her name is like Egg, and then another guy who's like friends with Cartwright. And they are trying to solve the murder. Egg is kind of in love with Cartwright, even though there's like a huge age gap, and the other guy is kind of just like observing and making kind of remarks here and there. But yeah, I think that the reason I didn't like it is because Poirot isn't really in the book that much. But it was a very interesting plot. It was a reread for me, but I still didn't remember from the last time I read it who did it. But it was a really good plot, actually, of like who the murderer was, and I really enjoyed that. And yeah, it's a Poirot book. As a Poirot book, it's entertaining, and even though I didn't love it, it's still something that I'm gonna enjoy reading again at some point, for sure. Yes, people, I read War and Peace in August. Technically, I finished it on 1st of September, but I'm gonna call it an August read because I read like 99% of it in August. Or I actually listened to it as an audiobook. And the version I listened to is actually not this one. And it was translated by different people. So this is the vintage classic edition, translated by Richard Peviar and Larissa Volokonsky. So the one that I will put on this here, who translated the version that I read as an audiobook. And I noticed that there were differences because I was trying to like hybrid read it, but I ended up just listening to the audiobook because there were significant differences in the English translation of this book. I have no idea which one is the best translation, or if that's even a thing. The audiobook was like over 65 hours. 67 hours? I don't know. It was ridiculously long. And it took me like almost the entire month of August. I did go for quite a lot of walks, and I was, doing stuff like that in order to listen to it. I managed to listen to it without speeding up the audiobook, which I think is very impressive. So this book, War and Peace, so it takes place for the most part in Russia, or for the whole part in Russia, in the early parts of the 19th century during the Napoleonic Wars. And Napoleon invades Russia. And so the Russians are obviously fighting Napoleon. And I will tell you that, so this is called War and Peace. And this is very much war. There is not so much peace in this book, I have to say. It's a lot of war. There's a lot of, it feels like it's like two different books, and like 80% of it is this very interesting. I'm very interested in history. I've read a lot about the Napoleonic Wars, although more from like the more Western parts of Europe centric. So I know that he went all over the place. He went even to, I think, North Africa, and I don't know so much about that part or the Russian part of his trying to conquer the world. But it was very fascinating to me. I really think that's a very interesting part of history. And so there were a lot of things in this book about the war in Russia that I thought was very interesting. And Tolstoy is really like talking about Napoleon and of course Tsar Alexander of Russia. There's a lot of like characters in this book who are like generals or colonels or commanders of some sort, officers in the army. There are also a lot of like just private soldiers who are doing all these heroic things. He does talk a lot about different things like strategies, military strategies, and if they should have done that or if they should have done this. And he's quite critical, I think, of Napoleon, obviously. But I actually think he's quite critical also of Russia. I don't know if Tolstoy was living in Russia at the time he wrote this book and how that would have been like accepted, because they still had the SARS when this book was written. So I don't know. Maybe that's something I will look into. I was thinking it when I was listening to this book, that this is the type of book that you need to take a course on it. I would love to take a course on this book. Just a semester where I have a teacher who's just explaining this book to me, because I think a lot of it I was just kind of getting through because I was mostly interested in the story of these people who are supposedly the main characters. You know, Natasha, and there is a Andrei and a Boris and a Nikolai and a Mary, I think. Maria. Is that her name? And like there are so many like princes and princesses and counts and countesses and, you know, high society people there. But you kind of lose track of them a lot in this book because there is so much war and like generals and Napoleon and I don't know. But oh my God, I love this book. I think that maybe this was not necessarily though it's very heavy, the right time for me to be reading this book. Maybe I needed to read it at a time where I have more leisure to actually like take notes even and just kind of, you know, study the book a little bit more. I didn't do any of those things. So I will definitely reread this book at some point, either this version or try to get like the Icelandic translation even. But this book, yeah, I think, this version of the book is like 1,200 pages or something, 1,100, no, it's over 1,200 pages. But I've been wanting to read this book, I think, for like 20 years. Since like in my mid to late 20s. And so I'm so proud that I read this book and I finished it and I enjoyed it. I didn't think that it was difficult, like with the language and whatever. The difficulty was just that it's so long and there's a lot of war. But yeah, maybe at some point in the future, many years from now, probably, I will reread this book. And if I still have a booktube channel, maybe I will do like a proper video about this book. I think that I can 100% recommend it if you are interested in classics and if you are interested in social history. I think Tolstoy does a really good job with descriptions and also with character building. There's some really interesting characters. Some of them I think are maybe a little bit flat and one-dimensional, but some of them are quite interesting and yeah. Now I need to go on a mission to find the miniseries and watch that because I think that could be really interesting. Yeah, but that's all I want to say about War and Peace. Good job. Yes, so this is A Man Called Ove by Fredrik Backman. I read the Icelandic translation. And I'm just going to tell you straight away that I don't know if I can actually talk about it in a lot of detail because it makes me cry. And I don't want to cry on the internet, so just a warning. If this video like ends very quickly, it's just because I can't do it. I can't do it. This is such a good book. I think this is my favorite book of the year. And at the same time, it's the most difficult book I've read in regards to the emotional weight of this book. It destroyed me, this book. Oh my God. So, the backdrop to that is that, just in case you don't know, and I feel that there should be trigger warnings on this cover here. I didn't know, because I like to go into books without really knowing much about them. I haven't seen the movies that have been made, and Sometimes that means that I end up reading something that or I'm not prepared to read what I'm reading, and it just kills me. But the trigger warning here is definitely grief and suicide. So, and I'm going to talk about this book. There are going to be spoilers, and I cannot talk about it without spoiling it. So if you haven't read this book, A Man Called Uwe, and you don't want to know too much, then maybe you should click off this video and just come back later when you've read it, because I do recommend it, even though it can be very hard if you have personal experience with suicide and these heavy topics of like grief and cancer. So it's still worth it, 100% worth it reading it, even though it's difficult. But okay, so I'm gonna count to 5, and then there are gonna be spoilers. So, I did not know that Uwe was going to be attempting to end his life. And so in the first couple of pages, basically, or chapters at least, I got really triggered, if that's the word, because 7 years ago, my brother took his own life. So he passed away by suicide, or from suicide. And the way he passed away is one of the ways that Uwe is trying to end his life. So just that, even though it's been 7 years, it's still very raw, and it's very easy to kind of peel off the scab, and time doesn't heal anything. That's just bullshit. You learn to live with it for sure, but it's still always very shallow in your kind of experiences. So that was just obviously devastating for me to read. Now don't worry, I'm in a very good place actually emotionally, and in my kind of processing and recovering from that trauma, but still it can still be very difficult. Another difficult thing about this book, also for me, my personal life, is that last October, my sister-in-law passed away from cancer. So she was my other brother's, I have 4 brothers, so my other brother's partner for like almost 30 years. So I could also relate to that, because obviously Uwe's wife has passed away from cancer. So there were just these extremely raw things in this book that really impacted me and just made this book one of the most difficult books that I've ever read. But at the same time, this is why I think this is actually why I read. This is, or one of the reasons at least for why I read. It is the power that books have, and how they can really help you work through some really horrible things in your own life. And I feel that it's so healing to read something that you can really relate to in your own life. Okay, let's try this. Let's try one more time. So, the things that I really loved about this book. First of all, I loved Uwe. I think that he is a fascinating character. And I think Fredrik Backman does such a great job of slowly introducing his backstory, which kind of gives us the explanation for his behavior. I think it's so good, so well done. I think that this may be one of the most romantic books as well that I've read. I mean, that love story between Uwe and his wife, it's just so beautiful. I tabbed it here. He says he understands like clear directions, like corners and, architectural thingies and drawings, like stuff like that. He understood things that were clear and you could just write it or draw it on paper. He was the man of the black and white reality. But she was in color, all the color of his life. I mean, have you heard anything as romantic? If someone would describe me as the color of their life, it's so beautiful. I also really loved, or thought it was actually heartbreaking, but at the same time hilarious. The fact that Uwe and his neighbor became enemies basically because his neighbor bought a BMW. Like did Uwe have a Saab? Was it a Saab? I don't remember it was a Swedish car brand. I think it was a Saab. And then his neighbor had a Volvo, I think. And then one day the neighbor buys a BMW. And then Uwe hates him. I think that was just hilarious. I mean, yeah. But I also loved the neighbor lady, the pregnant neighbor lady. I can't remember her name. She was so... I mean, I think that most of the characters in this book are just so well done. I mean, this book is just so good. Obviously, the emotional impact it had on me impacts my ability to critique this book objectively. I don't think, and that's not really what I do on this channel anyway. But yeah, this is why I read. Like I was trying to say earlier, like this is why literature, this is why books are so important. Because they allow you to really just work through your life, basically. Yeah. Oh, this book. So good. So good. So I want to say before I end the video that, first of all, if you want to see a video where people are actually talking about this book without breaking down, I would recommend you checking out Ellen Made Book Club's discussion on the book, as well as in Beyond Books, the channel called Beyond Books. I will link them in the description below, and you can go and check out their discussion about this book. Because I was reading this book as part of Ellen's from Ellen Made Book Club's book club. So they have a much broader discussion on the book. If you're interested, and if you're not already following them, you should be doing that. Yeah, but those were the books I read in August. 3 books, but books that, well, I mean, the Agatha Christie book was fantastic and enjoyable, even though it wasn't like the best book ever. I really enjoyed it still. And the other 2 were just books I feel I needed to read. And I think they came into my life at the right time. Well, maybe not War and Peace. It would have been nicer to maybe have more brain power, because I was working. I had so much to do in August for my job that I couldn't really enjoy the book as much as maybe I wanted to. I gave it 4 stars. I think I may have forgotten to say that, but I'm still it was such a good book to read, and I'm so happy that I've read it, and now I like kind of understand everything, like when people are talking about War and Peace, like it is one of the greatest classics ever, maybe one of the greatest books ever, and it's just fantastic. And A Man Called Uwe. I mean, now I want to read everything by Fredrik Backman, although I'm terrified as well, because that was a very like crazy experience. But I'm also very happy that I read that book. I think that in the last few months, I've been just so in my head with my PhD, and I'm in such a stressful period as well on my PhD that I'm kind of just closing down like my emotions about things that is not really in a healthy way. So I think that actually reading it this month really reminded me of the fact that I still need to take care of my mental health and my kind of grief process and everything like that. So I think it was really good for me to read, even though it was, like I said, so hard. And yeah, I guess that's that. Anyway, let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them, if you have, or if you would be interested in reading these books. And let's have a chat in the comments. Bye.